to return to school 5 days in person, starting with our week of orientation, the week of August 24th, and the first day of classes will be 3 weeks from today, August 31st, because Labor Day is a little late this year. So we're going to do this very similar to the way we did the previous 2 meetings. I will do most of the talking, and I've asked our other administrators who have been working with me multiple times a week in fairly lengthy meetings, trying to anticipate all of the various angles for what it would take to get us to come back to school. I've asked those folks to be available to monitor the chat. So if you have a question as we go through and as you see in various tools that we're going to provide and share with you, not just in this meeting, but also email them to you as well as make them available on delbarton.org. If you see things and a question comes to you, just put it into the chat. It's easier for everyone, I think. And so if it's a simple question that can be addressed by one of those folks on the administration team, they're going to jump in and answer your question. And so that way, when we get to the end, we can look at more complex questions and hopefully not have too many questions so our meeting can be fairly efficient. But our goal tonight is to give you as much and as thorough a presentation as possible. So we're not going to try to cut it short. We want to be thorough, but we also want to be respectful of your time and your family's time. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and there are 3 web pages that are going to be available on delbarton.org as microsites, and 2 of them are going to be microsites. One of them is something we're going to share with you that you can keep on your computer at home. And I'm going to use those as the blueprint for Reopen Delbarton, which is the phrase that we've used to name our plan to return to in-person instruction in 3 dimensions on campus in just a couple of weeks. So let me share my screen and okay. So what you're looking at is an Adobe Spark presentation that I want to thank Jessica Fittis, our Director of Marketing and Communications, and her assistant, Jared Lowy. They are the dynamic duo that run all of Delbarton's communications. They've done a beautiful job collating and cataloging all of the information that you'll need to learn about what it's going to take for us to come back to school this fall here in this presentation. And you're going to be emailed this after our meeting tonight. And there's also going to be a similar microsite on delbarton.org that we use similar to what we used during the spring. Again, it's going to be called Delbarton Reopen, where all of this information will not only be housed as well on our website, but it'll also be updated in real time. So whenever you go to delbarton.org and go to Delbarton Reopen, as I'll show you shortly, you'll get the most up-to-date information on all the aspects of returning to school and what it's going to take for us to remain in school during this coming school year. So there's a brief video which you can watch on your own. It's just a short message from me thanking you for your patience and also inviting you, if you ever have questions or concerns, I'm available. The other folks on the administration team are available. We are here for you. That's a big theme in this little video. And I want to stress that throughout the presentation tonight. We are here for you to enable your sons to return to school and have a full 3-dimensional Delbarton experience. So as we were thinking about how to do this, how is it that we're going to be able to restart school in a very different context than we've ever seen before? We developed a series of principles, and you're going to see these principles applied in different ways across the entire plan. So let's take a look at these principles in some detail. The first of these principles is community safety. Your son's safety, your safety, your son's relatives and friends, every member of the Delbarton community is our #1 priority. We want to do everything we humanly can to provide a healthy environment that's a secure environment where students feel safe and where they're able to do their best intellectual work. as well as to grow socially and emotionally. When people feel safe, they're able to flourish. And that's the key guiding principle that undergirds what we're trying to do. So community safety is number one. If we can establish community safety to the best extent that we can, then we're able to honor principle two, namely the on-campus experience. We're very grateful that people found our virtual program during the spring helpful and productive, but the nature of the Delbarton experience, as I've said before already tonight, is in 3 dimensions, where we are together with one another. Our social and emotional curriculum that helps your sons become young men who are mature, young men of faith, intellect, and service, happens when they're able to do that together, when they're engaging with one another, engaging with their teachers, engaging with their coaches. So we want to maximize the on-campus experience as best we can, certainly within the limits of health and safety requirements and whatever requirements we receive from the state of New Jersey. Thirdly, if we're able to do these first 2 things, and you can see how these principles all fit together and integrate into a whole, we are able to provide the greatest degree of academic excellence, academic coherence, as well as flexibility. Obviously, teaching and learning is at the heart of the day-to-day Delbarton experience, and we want to make sure that we can do the absolute best job we can of challenging your sons to grow intellectually as well as socially, emotionally, and spiritually. So we are doing everything we can to provide that our regular high quality program when we're here in person, as well as to have options should individuals or should we as a group need to go virtual for a period of time in these next months. I've mentioned a couple of times already, student social and emotional well-being. If you've seen anything in the news, and there's been an awful lot of news the last few months, but a theme that has emerged repeatedly, starting with the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as any number of other expert sources in the medical world, in the psychological world, as well as in the mass media. The importance of being together in person in school is been highlighted over and over again, especially for adolescents. It's essential for the social and emotional and spiritual well-being of our young people that they be together, that we build community, that we experience community, that we learn what it is like to be in community by actually doing it. And yes, you're able to do some of that when you're communicating through Zoom like we're doing right now, but the most powerful form of that community building happens in person. And part of the reason, a key reason why we are going back to school every day is because we believe that everyday in-person experience is where you get the greatest depth to an individual student's Delbarton experience. And we want to make sure not only are we helping them build these, but that we have resources, both human resources as well as programmatic resources, to support our students as they face the social and emotional and spiritual challenges of navigating school in the era of COVID-19. And then lastly, personal and collective responsibility. And this is going to be a central theme that I'm going to be sharing with our faculty and staff, and certainly with our students during orientation week. None of this will work. We will not be able to be together unless we each take individual and collective responsibility. Now more than ever, putting the other guy first by doing inconvenient things, not even necessarily difficult things, but things that are inconvenient, like wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, washing your hands more frequently than perhaps you ordinarily would. In themselves, they're not all that difficult. Together, they become a challenge only because you have to do them over and over again, and because it forces you to change your ordinary patterns. But unless we take that responsibility individually as well as a community, we will not be able to be together. So we can talk about all of the frameworks and plans and protocols that are possible to bring us back to school. But unless every single member of the community embraces them, takes them seriously, makes them his or her own, we will not be successful. The flip side of that is, if that does happen, we will be successful. We will be able to have in-person teaching and learning that is powerful, that is transformative, and that is safe to the extent that it is humanly possible to do that. So I really want to stress that last principle. Nothing of what I talked about before in the previous 4 principles is possible unless we embrace it and each take responsibility. And not that we need to police one another or, get into confrontations with one another, but that we need to take an attitude of mutual support, what St. Benedict called the mutual love of brothers, that we take that principle of brotherhood and really apply it in a very powerful, direct, visible way in this era of in-person learning during COVID-19. So those are our 5 principles. And in light of those principles, we have made several key modifications. We're going to go into these in detail shortly. And of course, you'll have this available to look at in depth at your leisure. We're going to apply daily screenings that folks are going to do at home, all employees and all students and their families. Modifications to how we transport students, making sure that masks are worn at all times, other than in very specific circumstances, and ensuring the greatest degree of social distancing wherever that's possible. Enhanced classroom and campus sanitation, changes to our food service, and changes to our programs in athletics, the arts, extracurricular activities, as well as campus ministry. So let's look first at health and safety. And this is a great picture of Mrs. McAuliffe. And Mrs. McAuliffe has been, to say that she has done Yo Women's work, not Yo Men's work, but Yo Women's work, has been extraordinary. Mrs. McAuliffe has poured over hours and hours of webinars and other kinds of resources to give us the best possible medical professional advice to help people stay healthy. So I really want to thank her for her leadership and for her commitment to you. Without her commitment to you, we would not be able to present this plan to you. So Mrs. McAuliffe, thank you very much for your amazing leadership here. So number 1, if you're sick, stay home. That's really simple. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be COVID-19 symptoms. It might be something else. If you're sick, stay home. Err on the side of caution. If we see students who are sick in school, we will send them home. So we've actually created an illness policy that you're going to see posted below, and that's also going to be available on our Reopen Roadmap hub on delbarton.org. And that's going to give you some very specific indicators of when to stay home and what to do when you're sick and what you need to do to return to school when you've gotten better. But when in doubt, stay home. One of the benefits, one of the silver linings of this process is that we've learned how to deliver a substitute, not an equivalent, but a substitute version of the Delbarton program virtually. And if you're sick, unless you're physically unable to keep up with your class, we will have tools in place that we never really had before that will enable you to keep up if you have to quarantine or if you have to stay home out of an abundance of caution. So do not be afraid that you're going to fall behind. We now have new tools in place that we've learned from virtual Delbarton back in the spring to help you keep up with your classes, keep up with your classmates, and be able to stay home, keep yourself safe, and keep them safe. So travel. Obviously, we don't have that much time left between now and the start of school, but if you are on the COVID-19 quarantine list for New Jersey, and if you've gone to a state that's on that list, you must stay home for 14 days before coming to school. That list changes every day. The state changes it every day. The link that you'll see here that you'll get shortly after we're done tonight will tell you what states require, if you're coming from those states or you've gone to those states and are coming back to New Jersey, they'll tell you if you've done that, you need to quarantine when you return. There's no way we are going to be able to know that independent of you. You're on your honor to be able to do that. But again, this is where that principle of personal responsibility take center stage. Take that responsibility. Quarantine. We will be able to help you keep up, and if it's absolutely necessary for you to go to one of these places. But if it's not, our short recommendation is don't. If it's discretionary travel to one of these places, please don't jeopardize being in school for 2 weeks. Just don't go. So for each of these sections that you'll be getting shortly, there's a tab that says Health and Safety FAQs, frequently asked questions. So when you click on those have more specific questions and provide detailed answers to those questions. I don't want to go through them now, but you'll be able to go through them when this is emailed to you after we're finished tonight. And each of the sections in this reopening plan has an FAQ tab. Okay, as I mentioned before, daily screening is going to be extremely important, and you've heard about some of this already. The CDC does not recommend that schools screen students in school. Their recommendation is that screenings be done by students' families or staff members by themselves or another family member at home before they come to school. So the screenings that we're going to do each day are going to have to be done by each family of a student or an employee by 7:15 each school day to record if there are any symptoms and your temperature. Obviously, you'll need to have a thermometer at home. You can have any kind of thermometer you want. Electronic thermometers are faster, but you don't necessarily have to have one. You can use a good old-fashioned mercury thermometer as well. Once you've filled out the questions on the app, only takes a couple of minutes. You'll get a message that confirms that your son is cleared to come to school that day, or if you're an employee, that you're cleared to come to school that day. If students do not comply, we will send them home. I'm going to be very clear about that. If we do not have this assistance from parents at home, you will be asked to come and pick up your son from school, unless we are able to, we are able to see who hadn't filled it out yet, and we'll find the student before class. If we can do that, he'll be able to stay. But if he has symptoms of any kind, whether it's COVID symptoms or anything like that, he's going to go home. If a student gets sick during the day, even if he was fine at the beginning of the day, we will send him home. And we'll talk more about how that works a little bit later on. So the directions for how to access the app are here. And again, you've gotten information about that from Mrs. McAuliffe. The same information is here. And you'll be able to get further information about how to use it when you look at this presentation after it's emailed to you. So that screening function will begin on Sunday, which is August 16th. Masks. So this is a central pillar along with screening of our program. All students and all staff have to wear masks at all times. The only times where they're not to do that is during meals, and we'll talk more about how that's going to work later, and established mask breaks. You can't have a vented mask. You've probably seen a number of forms of masks. Those are not appropriate for us. If you have a medical condition of whatever kind that wearing a face covering like a mask exacerbates it, you just need to provide Mrs. McAuliffe with a doctor's note, and we'll come up with another form of face covering that's appropriate for you. So again, wherever students are, other than during meals and during established mask breaks, masks are to be worn by students and staff at all times during the school day. Athletic practices have specific points where masks are required, and other points during practices or games where masks are not required or not appropriate, and the head coaches will be trained on when those will be and how to exercise oversight when it comes to athletics. So again, in-school illness, if a student's sick, we will send you home. We will err on the side of caution. It doesn't matter if it's a COVID symptom or not. We will send a student home. If COVID-19 is suspected based on symptoms, we will ask the student to be tested and to remain home for 14 days. If the test comes back negative, there's no risk that he's going to transmit it. You just have to have a doctor's note that A, he had a non-COVID illness, or B, if he does test negative, he only has to stay home for 24 hours once he's symptom-free. And if the symptoms that he has get worse or continue at the same level, you should be tested more than once. And you can get specific assistance from Mrs. McAuliffe about how to navigate that, because each individual student's illnesses are going to be different. If a student tests positive but is asymptomatic, which is highly possible, that seems to be very common among young people, you have to remain home for 10 days from the date of the positive test. And if someone is in close contact, meaning you're within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, if you're in close contact with a COVID positive person or a symptomatic person, whether in school or out of school, that person will have to stay home for the 14-day quarantine period as well. And so that then takes us to contact tracing, which is going to be a critical feature of our control and monitoring program for the virus. So contact tracing is when someone's tested as positive or is symptomatic, you look at all the people that student or staff member has been in contact with. In order to facilitate that, students will have assigned seats, both in their classrooms as well as at lunchtime. So it'll be very quick to figure out who is in or around that person. We will be using the assistance of the Morris Township Department of Public Health. So when a student is sent home, we will notify the Board of Health. If the test is positive, the Board of Health, as well as Mrs. McAuliffe, will begin the contact tracing and quarantining process for any students or teachers who, as I said, within the past 14 days, were 15 minutes or more within 6 feet of that student. So again, if people meet those criteria, then Mrs. McAuliffe, as well as the Board of Health, will make sure that quarantine will be applied to those individuals who meet that criteria for coming into close contact with someone who tests positive. But we do not have the resources, the personnel resources to do that on our own, but the Board of Health has made it clear that they are available to us because they have the professional expertise and the resources to assist us in doing contact tracing if it becomes necessary. Just one critical point, we are not going to be testing asymptomatic students. So testing is only going to be triggered if a student is symptomatic or if a student knows that he has been within close contact of someone who has tested positive and or is symptomatic. So unless a student is symptomatic or within close contact of someone who is or who's tested positive, we're not going to be doing random tests. We're not going to be doing across the board tests. That would be an overuse of testing resources, which are scarce. We want to commit our testing resources in the larger community, not just at Delbarton, but in the larger community here in Morris County for people who have a high likelihood of having been exposed to it or who are actually maybe carrying the virus. So remote learning. As I said, we learned quite a bit about what remote learning requires from our experience of virtual Delbarton this summer, or this past spring. So if a student needs to be at home for whatever reason, whether it's just a regular illness, the common cold, the flu, or a quarantine, if a student has to miss for any reason, it doesn't matter what it is, we will provide options for live streaming and recording through Zoom so that all students can participate in class. So unless the student's physically unable because of illness to participate, he would just follow the school day using his computer, and every classroom will have the equipment necessary for that student to participate as if he were sitting in the room. It won't be the same, but it'll be an effective substitute. It's a school day like any other. So if you're at home and you're physically able to participate because you're well enough, you have to come to class just like you would if you were sitting in the classroom here at Delbarton. And if there's a reason, maybe a doctor's appointment, that a student has to miss a class, the student would need to contact his teacher in advance of that particular class. If you are a student who has a medical reason sufficiently serious to warrant learning from home, even if you're not physically ill, or obviously positive for COVID-19, but there's a high risk from being in person, you need to provide Mrs. McAuliffe with a detailed doctor's note that describes the illness that prevents them from attending. It's going to be very confidential. We'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. As of now, we've only had a couple of inquiries about this. So the overwhelming majority of students have indicated that they wish to return and feel safe in returning based on their own health conditions. But if you want to request virtual learning for any period of time because you believe that you or your son have a high risk for being in person, you need to have that conversation with Mrs. McAuliffe now and provide her with the documentation that she'll ask you for to explain why that's the case. And then you've probably seen these in many different places, but these are the things we're going to ask folks to do every day. And again, each of them individually is not all that difficult. As a group, they can be irritating, they can be annoying, but they're necessary. These are the specific sorts of things that we need people to do so that we can all be here. Wash your hands a lot or use hand sanitizer. There will be hand sanitizer at the entrances, at every entrance for every building. There will be hand sanitizer in every classroom. There are hand sanitizers in every office. So you will never be more than a few feet away from hand sanitizer. Maintaining social distancing, wearing masks, avoiding touching your face, your eyes, or your mouth. If you cough, cough into your elbow, and doing the daily screening before you come to school. If you have any of these symptoms, you need to see Mrs. McAuliffe immediately. Chills, feverish, fatigue or body aches, cough, congestion, a runny nose, sore throat. These symptoms can often seem like any one of a number of other illnesses. The sudden loss of smell or taste is one that people often who've been through this process with the virus, that's something they point to that, oh, that's a real specific indicator. And that may well be, but there are other things that could cause that. So if you have these symptoms, see Mrs. McAuliffe, talk to Mrs. McAuliffe. If you stay home because of these, communicate that to Mrs. McAuliffe. Okay, so then, as I indicated before, we've actually created an illness policy. So when you're sent home from school due to illness, what you do at home, what you need to do to be able to return to school, and that's indicated right here. So I don't want to go through it in detail because it is very detailed, but this is basically something that will be sent to parents if we send a student home because of illness. These are the specific indicators of what would get you sent home, and then what you need to do to come back to school. So again, that'll be there on the presentation that you'll be getting after we're done, and you'll be able to look at that at your convenience. So it's very specific why we would send them home and what's necessary for them to come back. And this is all based on the CDC's guidelines for students in school. And of course, as I mentioned, at any time, if you have any questions about the health and safety protocols and procedures that we have, please contact Mrs. McAuliffe. That's her school number, as well as her email address. All right. So as I mentioned before, student well-being is very, very important. That's not just physical well-being, but also social and emotional. So this year, we had already planned to launch with the leadership of Dr. Durso, our Dean of Guidance, our freshman advisory program, which is going to be a way for ninth grade students to group into small groups of about 12 kids apiece under the leadership of a trained faculty member to help them navigate that transition into Delbarton, whether coming from our own middle school or coming to Delbarton for the first time. It's going to be based on our mission, specifically through our hallmarks of a Benedictine school. And it's designed to provide students with opportunities to learn about themselves, to learn about one another, to develop social and emotional skills and to help them cope, and not just cope, but thrive in their freshman year in the upper school at Delbarton. So you'll see here all of those particular skills that this program will focus on. They'll be meeting about once every other week, and we're going to be doing even more intensive training with our advisory staff for 2 days at the end of next week to further enhance the work they've been training for the last several months. They're going to be doing 2 full days of training right before orientation begins. And we think that this will be an amazing program. Specifically, it's going to help support our newest students. Dr. Durso is, as you likely already know, a licensed clinical psychologist. He's always available by email or his work cell phone. You'll find that information here. You can also use this link to book an appointment with him to do in-person or telehealth counseling. Dr. Durso specializes in being available. And if he cannot provide the assistance that's needed, he can refer you or your family to other professionals who can give you the help that you need. Our guidance counselors in particular, this year our guidance counselors are not teaching anymore. They're going to be 100% committed during their workday to doing their primary job as guidance counselors. That's an important change that we made for this coming school year. And they're going to use that time to focus even more intently on students who might be having difficulty, looking for indicators of difficulty, being proactive with monitoring students to make sure that they're thriving as best as possible, to help them improve or affirm positive habits, as well as address negative responses to the challenges that they might be facing academically, socially, emotionally, or spiritually. There will be more frequent grade level meetings than we have done before to help each grade collectively kind of process this whole experience. So we're going to do that. That we found that that was very helpful during the virtual period, and we're going to do that in person, safely, of course, using social distancing here in person. And if we do have to go virtual at some point, we'll continue those virtually as well. So one of the areas that we've been focusing on is there might be students who are hard of hearing or who have particular need to be able to see people's faces, to read emotions, facial expressions, follow speech, and just be able to participate effectively. So we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that those students have the resources they need and that their teachers have the training that they need to respond to them and make sure that not only are they keeping themselves and their students safe physically, but they're also able to modify instruction to make sure that those students are not left behind because they may be particularly disadvantaged in this kind of a situation. And as we did before during the spring, surveys will be done regularly to assess well-being as well as needs and get suggestions and feedback from you, the entire Delbarton community, what we need to do to make our program more effective. Just because we're back here in person doesn't mean we don't need to constantly have an attitude of consistent, continual improvement. All right, so the basics for the school day. Transportation, quite a few of our students use the bus. If you're on a bus, we're going to spread kids out as best we can, but students and drivers have to wear masks. Buses will be loaded from back to front. It won't be just sit where you like. There will be specific seating arrangements provided on each bus. We're going to spread students out as best we can. The buses are sanitized every day, as well as between bus runs, using EPA-approved materials. And our own school buses, the ones that we own, will be treated daily using an electrostatic fogger. We bought several of those. They're very, very effective. And so long as the weather cooperates, we'll have the windows open on the buses. So food service. Food service, this is going to be a major area of change. The food will be the same, of very high quality and good, but how we eat will be different. So students will not be using the dining hall for their meals. Students will be able to go for breakfast. If you want to get breakfast food, you'll be able to get it. It's all food, no matter what time of day, lunch being the main meal, obviously. Breakfast and the afternoon snack are much less heavily used, but all food will be prepackaged. There will be hot options, cold options, but all the food will be prepackaged. You go, get it, and leave. So if you're going to get breakfast, you can go up, get it. There'll be some space to eat it in the dining hall because the number of students who use it is not very big, or they can eat it outside of the dining hall as well. They just can't eat it when they're in Trinity Hall. Lunchtime. This year, we're going to be going back to our previous pattern of 3 lunch periods to enable more time for students to pick up their lunch, because number one, the way students will get their food is different. They'll have to go in line, get their food, and then leave, but they're going to be eating their food in the gymnasiums. So the St. Joseph Gymnasium and the Abbott Brian Clark Gymnasium are going to be set up with tables that will enable students to be seated at least 6 feet apart. That'll be a chance for them to take their masks off. They'll still be able to see their friends, but the dining hall is too small. So we're actually going to set up both gymnasiums to enable that to happen. And since we can handle more kids by using both gyms, we're able to go from 4 lunches to 3. So the kids will get a little bit extra time and a little bit extra time to go from one building to another with their food. The dining hall will then be used for faculty and staff, because right now its regular capacity of over 200 is now reduced to 60 people because of social distancing requirements. So while I'm here, I wanted to show you Sage has created this microsite that they're going to attach to their tab on our homepage, where you can see all the different things that they're doing to keep people safe, what the menus will look like, and what the specific procedures are for handling things like allergies, as well as any other questions about nutrition or the food service. So they've created this site for us, and this will be a part of our webpage as well if you want to go into a lot of detail about the food service. One thing that's going to be very important is that students will need to assist us in cleaning up after themselves. So after each lunch, at the end of each lunch, there'll be a set time where the proctors will have students pick up their trash, throw it away, and then clean the tables. It's not physically possible to clean 2 gymnasiums without student assistance. So again, here's a good example of collective responsibility that we need on the part of students eating lunch to get the eating area ready for the next group to come in. Phys Ed will be outside as much as possible during the fall to enable us to keep the gymnasium set up on a permanent basis. It's simply not possible to break them down and open them and set them up again when you're trying to set up enough seating for almost 160 students at each lunch in 2 different gymnasiums. So what are we doing to keep the building clean as we're going about our day-to-day work? So we normally have a very clean building, but we're doing extra work to make sure that we are doing everything we can to use sanitation to fight the virus. We're going to be using disinfectant cleaners with EPA-approved products for all areas in the building: classrooms, restrooms, common areas. And we have electrostatic foggers that have a disinfectant that doesn't require wiping. It's very quick, but it kills the virus, kills viruses and bacteria immediately. It doesn't leave any residue. It just evaporates very quickly. It's a very powerful tool that will enable us to sanitize a classroom in 5 minutes. And as I said, there'll be hand sanitizing stations all over campus. Each classroom will have disinfectant wipes and sprays. We're actually going to be extending the pass time between each class 5 minutes, from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. 5 minutes of that time will be, actually we're going to use a signal. We don't normally have bells, but we're going to use a signal over the PA. That'll be, teachers will end the class. Class will spend a few minutes wiping their desks down, cleaning everything up, getting the class ready for the next group of students. And again, that principle of mutual responsibility and mutual care for one another. And then they'll be able to leave and take a little bit extra time to get to their next class. We've also made sure that we're installing high efficiency MERV filters in our heating and air conditioning systems. They're as efficient as we can get, and they trap 98% of airborne particles that also include those that carry bacteria and viruses. So this is the industry norm for HVAC systems like ours. These are the filters that are recommended to be used by the experts in the field. So let's look then at the day-to-day academic schedule. And here there won't be a huge amount of difference, but there's still some things to point out. We're still going to have our regular 6-period day. The class periods are going to be shortened. Every class period will be, except for the lunch period, will be 40 minutes, which will enable us to borrow the time that we need for that extra passing time. And God willing, if this becomes unnecessary later on in the school year, if health conditions change, we can very easily go back to our traditional length for class periods. But for now, there'll be a slightly modified length of periods, but the same basic structure, 7-day cycle where classes will rotate through. We're going to preserve that as we normally would. So it's actually coming to school that's going to be the biggest change. So when you come into a building, you're going to see signage everywhere. You have to have your mask on. You're not going to be, you should not be coming into a building unless you have a mask on. That's true for parents as well as for students. We ask that parents not drop off things that sons may have forgotten during the day. We don't want a lot of in and out over the course of the day. Students are only going to be able to go to their lockers before 8:05 and after 2:40. So whatever you need, you're going to have to carry it with you for the day. And most students do that anyway, or I shouldn't say most, a lot of students do that anyway. In order for us to have full access to the hallways, we can't have lockers blocking people up. So when you come to school, you can go to your locker and then you go right to your first period class. So there won't be any lingering or sitting in the halls or sitting in any place outside of the library. Like people normally do. When you get your books, you come to school. When you come to school, you get your books and you go right to your classroom. So classrooms will all be open. Students will be able to go there. They'll be supervised by staff members in the hallway before teachers arrive to make sure that they're safe. But otherwise, the halls need to be clear, and that's going to be a very different procedure than we normally do when people come to school. And as I said before, students are going to have assigned seating for contact tracing if it's necessary. To make sure that there won't be any unnecessary mingling, students are going to have, there's going to be a tape line down the middle of each hallway. We want students to stay to the right. So there'll be two-way traffic. That's fine with masks and only a few seconds where a student might be passing. There's no risk really that's meaningful from what we've been told of communicating the virus. Communicating the virus happens when you're in close contact within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. That's not what happens in the hallways, but we don't want people hanging out or kind of gravitating around the locker. You come out of class, you go down the hall, and you stay to the right. And as I said, we're going to have longer passing time between periods so teachers can get ready for the next period, break down and close from the previous period, and make sure that the rooms are as clean as possible so that students can come in as well as exit the classroom safely. So again, in class, everybody wears a mask, faculty as well as students. We'll spread the desks apart as widely as possible, assign seating. Each classroom will be sanitized with the electrostatic fogger at the end of each day. The writing center, the math center, and the communications center, all of which involve fairly close work between students and teachers, they will operate, but they will have the same kind of modifications, social distancing, masks, etc. Classroom windows will be open on a regular basis so long as the weather permits. As I said, phys ed will be happening outside as much as possible. The classroom components for phys ed, that is health class and driver's ed for sophomores, that'll be taking place largely in the winter term to maximize outdoor time during the fall. and individual guidance meetings between an individual student and his guidance counselor. There will be masks worn and social distancing. All class meetings will happen in the Fine Arts Center auditorium, which has more than enough space for an individual class to spread out with more than enough social distancing between each student. And again, if we have to go back to remote learning, we will build on the experience and the achievements from virtual Delbarton last spring. We will add more class periods so that classes will be able to meet more frequently. And we will also have time built into the schedule for activities, arts, and athletics. And we will also host community-wide morning meetings that will be scheduled into the weekly schedule to make sure they don't run over and interfere with class time. Hopefully we will not need to do that, but we are prepared to do that if we need to at a moment's notice. So we are going to offer as many extracurricular activities as we can, and we'll talk more about the arts a little bit later on, because that's and athletics, which are the two biggest areas of extracurriculars. Anything that can operate with the current restrictions, we will do. Anything that cannot, obviously won't be able to operate. We'll have to operate in a very different way. And you'll see that, you'll see that in a little more detail when we look at things like campus ministry, community service, arts, and athletics. So anytime that we have to do a school event, whether it's a morning meeting, an assembly, the community service fair, we will use Google Meetups. So students will be in their M-Block classrooms. There'll be a small group of people at a particular place where the event is happening. That'll be true for school masses. So there will be a small group of students in the church, along with the monks and the other members of the staff, like the music ministers. The rest of the student body will be in their M-Block classrooms, participating electronically, and communion will be distributed in Trinity Hall or wherever the other classrooms are. So that same basic principle will be applied anytime we would normally be all in the same place, whether in the church or in the Fine Arts Center. So for parents, so we are going to do as many parent events as we can in person, including back to school night. But in order to do that, we need to multiply some of the events. For example, back to school night, there will be 3 back to school nights, one for 7th and 8th grade, one for 9th and 10th, one for 11th and 12th. You'll see those on the online school calendar. For example, we ask for parents for back to school night that only one parent come rather than both, because that enables us to have more people in a classroom and provide as much spacing as we can. We do have, at this point, 2 faculty members who, because they have critically ill children, will be teaching remotely. If that's the case, we will be providing a Zoom conference or a recorded video presentation for back to school night, as well as other options, probably a Zoom option for parent-teacher conferences in October. We're really focused right now on September. We want to get September right. We know that those other events are not far away on the horizon, but we're very much focused on September and making September work well. But we are definitely looking to events like parent-teacher conferences and thinking about what we might need to do to make those work, whether in person or virtually. What we're trying to figure out what would be the most effective way to do that. So as I said, back to school night, instead of just 2, we have 3. So September 15th, 7th and 8th grade, September 16th, 9th and 10th grade, September 17th is 11th and 12th grade. So again, we ask that just one parent comes, and if you have multiple sons, maybe one comes for one, the other comes for the other, to share the work, but also it's very important that not only are we spreading the grades out, but also that we keep it to one parent. And if you have any questions about back to school night or any parts of the academic program within this framework, within this reopening plan, please contact Josh Hartle, who's our Assistant Headmaster for Academic Affairs. This is his extension as well as his email. Again, there are more detailed questions in the academic FAQs that are a part of this presentation that you'll be getting shortly. Field trips. So we are really only going to be having 2 field trips this year, namely the 7th grade rafting trip and the 9th grade outdoor team building trip. We have been in communication with the folks at Camp Bernie for the 9th graders and the whitewater rafting operators on the Delaware River for the 7th graders. They are operating right now under New Jersey or Pennsylvania state guidelines for safe operation for those kind of activities. So they have assured us that they can do them safely. And so because they're so important, we're going to be doing them both. They're both going to be taking place on Friday, August 28th, as you already know. These are required events for both grades. If there's a reason why your son cannot come, you need to communicate with his guidance counselor. So it'd be Mr. Kovacek for 9th grade and Mr. Semino for 7th grade. So for each of these field trips, there are specific requirements about masks, social distancing, how food will be served, how we're going to be transporting students to provide maximum social distancing. So it's similar principles that you'll see here for the 9th grade trip as well as the 7th grade trip. And again, these are based on the operators telling us we are operating right now with groups safely based on the state's requirements. And so given that assurance from them, we felt it was appropriate to go forward with them. But right now, these are the only 2 field trips we're going to be doing. And again, if you have questions, Mr. Kovacek's contact information is here. And for the 7th grade trip, you can contact Mr. Semino. His information is here. So as I said, campus ministry is also going to be affected by what we're doing. We have completely restructured our retreat days, as well as the way that we pray together to work within this framework for safety while we're here in person. These programs are at the heart of our mission as a Benedictine Catholic school, so it's something that we knew we needed to re-engineer so that we could have them and have them make a difference in your son's lives this coming year. So for our retreat program, retreats will still be required, but we're going to be doing them in a different way. The senior class retreats and the middle school day of recollection, those were just 1-day programs, and we're going to be doing those at St. Paul's Inside the Walls in Madison, the Diocese of Patterson's Evangelization Center. They have plenty of room for social distancing, not a problem. We transport students there and back, so those are the dates that are in the calendar now. And middle school on the 21st of October. There are 3 dates for seniors. We break the class into 3 groups, so we break it down into smaller size, October 7th, January 20th, and March 17th. So the freshman retreats, which are a very important part of the of the induction of students into what it means to be a student at Delbarton, we're going to be doing them still. We're going to be using larger spaces on campus. We're not going to stay overnight in the retreat center. The retreat center is not open yet for group stays. So it'll be a commuting experience. The retreat will start after school on Friday. Students will go home. Parents will bring them back on Saturday and come back Saturday evening to pick them up. And you'll get more details about the timetable later, but students will be asked to make their retreat selections during orientation. So there are 3 dates available to freshmen, the 30th and 31st of October, November 13, 14, and December 4 and 5. And they'll be learning more about that at orientation in a couple of weeks. Same thing with our sophomore retreats. We're not able to go to the Romero Center in Camden for the urban immersion because they're not able to handle our groups just yet. But St. Joseph's Shrine in Sterling with the Trinitarians is a large enough place. We've used them before for other programs. They have enough room to handle what we need. And since the sophomore theology program has a heavy emphasis on Catholic social teaching and social justice, the retreats will, even though it's not at the Romero Center and not in Camden, will still have that social justice focus. And again, they'll come to school. These are multi-day retreats. So we will take them from Delbarton to the shrine and bring them back. And again, the dates are here: October 8th, 9th, December 10th and 11th, April 8th and 9th. The junior Kairos retreats, which is a centerpiece of our retreat program, those are 3-day retreats. Normally students would stay overnight. In this case, they won't, but they'll be commuting back and forth, basically like they're coming to school, except they'll be going to the retreat instead of having their classes as they normally would. You'll see the retreat dates are there. I've never seen a Kairos retreat done this way, and I really give Dr. Heidig and Mr. White credit for re-engineering this thing fairly quickly to make sure that this powerful retreat experience is still available to our students in a safe way. And then for service, it really depends on what our service sites allow us to do. If we're able to go and do in-person service, we will. If we can't, we will find other ways to do community service, depending on what our options are. So we have to, this is very much a wait and see. I wish we could be more specific. The drives will take place. How we deliver those items is going to be an open question. But we have to wait and see what are, like the places where we tutor, for example. Maybe we can't go in person, but maybe we could do tutoring through Zoom like we're having this meeting right now. So we have yet to get information from the places where we serve. As we do that, we will adapt our service programs accordingly. As I said, like any other assembly, there'll be a small group of students in the Abbey Church. The rest of the student body will be in their classrooms during their M block classes, and we'll distribute communion in the individual hallways. We'll still be able to have Mass in the St. Martin Oratory with social distancing. I'm the usual celebrant for that. It's at 7:40 in the morning. Parents as well as staff and students are welcome. We'll still be able to offer confessions each week, again with social distancing. So our individual personal prayer as well as collective prayer opportunities and worship opportunities will continue, but with the common sense modifications that you would expect and that many of you have seen already in your parish churches or your home churches happening right now. So again, if you have any questions, there are specific questions in the FAQs here. If you have other questions that aren't answered there or want to talk more, Dr. Heidig is available both by email, and he's not able to join us tonight for this meeting, but you can reach him by phone or by email and he'll respond very quickly. So as I said, we're going to have as many different extracurriculars for the full Delbarton experience as we can. Athletics is obviously a central feature of that. We are in the process of learning from the NJSIAA as well as the other leagues that we belong to exactly what is going to be available to our students. So as a general rule, we're not going to be traveling very far, even within state. There won't be any out-of-state competitions. As of August 4th, there won't be any state championship tournaments. There won't be any county tournaments or county championships. So it'll be a limited schedule. Those things are still being worked on right now. We don't have a lot of detail. So it's important that when you go to the hub on delbarton.org, just keep checking on athletics and you'll see updates there. Right now, we're still in a period of voluntary workouts, and those have been going very, very well. There will be a 2-week period right when school begins where it's a statewide blackout period where no practices or workouts of any kind that are led by coaches can happen. And then the formal preseason for the fall will begin on September 14th. That's a Monday. The season will basically run through the month of October as well as early November for soccer, football, and cross country. Right now, football has a 6-game schedule. Soccer has a 12-game schedule. Cross country will be organized. Varsity meets will be organized on a league basis. JV and freshman meets will be organized by individual schools. Unfortunately, because we have the land, we're going to be able to offer a cross-country course to have sub-varsity level races and meets here at school. So parents, we ask that if you're waiting for your son during practice, please don't congregate. Wait in your car or wait and practice social distancing. Please have your cell phone handy. That's generally not a problem. We do not know if the state's going to allow us to have spectators. You've probably seen professional sports over the last couple weeks. I don't think we'll have cutouts. I think we will either have real people or no one at all. We don't know what those requirements are yet. We are waiting for that. And as soon as we get that information about if we can have spectators, if so, how many, and we'll share that with you as soon as we can. So right now, our students have been doing a great job doing we're right now before the Magnus Health app is available for screening. We're doing a screening on paper, and students have been doing a phenomenal job. Our football coaches, our soccer coaches have told me students are ready to go. There might be 50 or 60 guys, and it takes maybe 5 to 7 minutes to get everybody screened, take their temperature, make sure they have all their forms in order. So if a student indicates a temperature above 100.4, there's a specific procedure that we follow that's here. So again, just like we're going to err on the side of caution during the school day, the same thing is going to be true for athletics. You've seen in professional sports that the virus can travel very quickly in a team setting where by its very nature, you're close together. You can't play a team sport and not be close together. That's not humanly possible. And so that's why we'll be using these basic procedures here. So right now we are in this phase 2 period. So the individual pods or groups of athletes who can work together, it's now 25 students. Students can use the weight room under certain conditions. This is that 2-week sort of dead period or no contact period. You can do it virtually, but you can't have any in-person interaction or coaches running any kind of workouts like they're doing right now in this phase 2 summer recess period. And as I said, opening day is Monday the 14th. And then the first games for soccer, cross country, and football are October 1, 2, and 3. For middle school athletics, we're going to follow the same schedule. So no middle school athletics will happen until September 14th. And that's not all that different from what we normally do. Middle school athletics normally doesn't start until after classes begin. So it's just going to be a little bit later than it normally would be. So if you participate in the arts, obviously what we do is, again, much like athletics, it's hard to do the arts, particularly theater or music, when you're not together. So we have a very specific procedure here. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but basically we used the New Jersey Arts Council September Ready guidelines, which were drafted in coordination with the State Department of Health and the Department of Ed. Basically, the general principle is anything that does not involve singing will be able to resume, namely the orchestras, instrumental ensembles, the rock band, and theater. Because singing is a COVID-19 contagion factor, we're not going to have choral music until further notice. And that's just, again, following the recommendations and the guidelines that we're getting from our state arts organization. So there'll be specific procedures for those ensembles that will be performing, when students arrive, what they need to do, when students are in a rehearsal space, what they need to do. There'll be very specific like indicators of social distancing, doors left open, all of these specific things to make it possible to do these things safely. And then when students leave, what they need to do to break down the space and get it ready for cleaning it up and making sure that it's ready to go for the next group. And again, the rehearsal schedules and locations will be on our Reopen Roadmap Hub. And again, if you have any other questions related to music, you can contact Mr. Blazier here. As far as theater goes, Mr. Korka, again, is going to be using the guidelines from Arts Ed New Jersey that we have used for our music programs. And we definitely want to provide theater experiences, either a traditional performance with a small audience and streaming, a live performance with no live audience, fully streamed, or something that's recorded and edited. A number of schools did something like that if their spring production took place during the virtual period. So we've seen other schools do this, and they've given us some indicators and examples of what to do depending on how many people can be physically present. And again, there'll be screening requirements, mask requirements, social distancing requirements, what's necessary to do to make it possible for these things to happen. So it's the same basic principles that we're using during the school day, we'll be using for musical ensembles or for the theater, both in rehearsals, auditions, as well as during performances. And again, if you have any questions, you can contact Mr. Corica. And again, there's an FAQs page with more specific questions that may be of interest to you. So our faculty and staff, they are very keen on being back. They want to be here. They want to be with your sons. This is why they work here. And so just so people are clear about what the role of our staff will be, our teachers will be enforcing the rules that we need for us to be able to be here. So students, you should expect teachers, if people aren't wearing masks, to ask you to do it or to tell you to do it. And you need to cooperate with them. There's really no other way to put it. If you don't cooperate with them, then that's going to cause a difficulty for everyone. And that would then lead to a conversation with the moderator and possibly moving into the overall school discipline system. We don't want to do that. I don't expect that will be necessary, but this is a mission critical activity. Wearing a mask, maintaining as much social distancing is mission critical. For us to be here, it has to happen. And so our teachers are going to be the people to help make that happen. We're going to be limiting group projects and paired work, again, to keep students as far apart as possible. As I said, we have 2 faculty members who will be teaching remotely because they have critically ill children who are at very high risk for life-threatening illness if they were to get the coronavirus. And so your sons will be informed about who they are and how that'll work. They'll be in class here. The teacher will be teaching at home remotely. All of our staff meetings will have social distancing procedures and require the wearing of masks. We're actually going to mark the seats in the auditorium so the faculty and staff know where to sit to keep everybody far enough apart. And we are actually adding a benefit, just so folks know, a lot of our teachers and employees who have students in the public schools in particular, they're not going to be in school every day. And so it's going to be very challenging for them. So for us to make it possible for you to be here every day, we're going to provide an additional benefit for all employees, not just teachers, to help them with childcare expenses so that they can be here every day to teach and to do the things that they do that make Delbarton the special place that it is. So for admissions, obviously you're already here. So this is just so that you know and maybe can tell others who might be applying for admission for next fall. We plan to have, we've already gotten applications for next year, which is really good. Everything is electronic. It's all online on our admissions homepage. We will be doing our traditional process for interviews, for testing, to the extent that we're allowed to do that. Obviously using the social distancing and other safety protocols that we've talked about before. This will also apply to our open house, which is Saturday, October 3rd. So we're going to do everything we can to have in-person admissions. If for whatever reason an applicant can't do in-person admissions, we're going to make it possible for that family to go through the process virtually. And again, if you have any particular questions, you can have that family, or you could contact the admission office. That'll go right to Dr. Donovan at admissions@delbarton.org. And then all of our other non-academic operations. So if you need to do business with the business office, the advancement office, marketing, communications, housekeeping, buildings and grounds, those of you who are involved with the Mothers Guild, Fathers and Friends, all of our different parents organizations, athletic boosters, these are going to be the principles that will apply when you come to school to do business, or you need to go to a particular office to meet with people or to do business here on campus. Okay, so that then takes us to where we are and where we're going in the short term. So this is our meeting day, August 10th. Our new faculty and staff will be having their orientation at the end of next week, August 20th and 21st. For those of you who are new, if you're a transfer student, if you're a new seventh grader, new ninth grader, our new family mass and welcome picnic, you've already gotten an invitation and information from Erin Manahan, our parent group liaison. That's going to be a great day. We'll be able to worship together, learn more about how to get involved at Delbarton and how to buy great Delbarton gear at the Delbarton shop, which is a very important part of the experience. The following day, we're actually going to have our faculty and staff in for their first day so we can orient them. We've changed the schedule here a little bit. We're going to brief our faculty and staff in person, kind of walk them through our procedures so that they're super clear on what happens. And then we're actually going to have our older students come in first so that they already know the standard drills. This will be a way for us to work through what we're doing in a new way so that they in turn can be of support to the brand new students in the 7th and 9th grade. The 8th graders, they've already been here for a year, but we had to put them somewhere. So they're included on the Wednesday as well, so we can keep the numbers manageable. And then on Thursday, so students are done on Thursday. That's the second day of faculty and staff orientation. We'll be having a presentation from a renowned expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her name is Dr. Alanie Michael. We had scheduled her many months ago, and we're very excited to have her because obviously what she's going to talk to us about is of even more importance than we thought it was when we scheduled her in the first place. And then that Friday, there's nothing on campus. The only things happening are the 7th grade rafting trip, the 9th grade Camp Bernie trip, and then Monday, August 31st, 3 weeks from today, is the first day of class. And that's when the fall term begins in earnest. So before I go to questions, let me just show you this screen here. This is our reopen roadmap. So everything you've seen here in this presentation that you're going to be emailed is also going to be present here. So you can get a link to the presentation. You can see our community principles. And just like we did for virtual Delbarton, there'll be buttons for topic areas, field trips, academics, school day basics, all the various components of the presentation, but they'll all be updated and you'll see the date. Whenever it's updated, there'll be a new date. So you'll be able to see right away what's new and be able to go to it. Okay, we've actually created a special email it's called reopen2020@delbarton.org. So whatever question you have, you don't have to wonder who does this go to. If you send it to that email address, we will get it to the person who can best answer your question. All right, so I've talked for a little over an hour. So let me go to our questions. So I have to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to go to the chat and see if there's anything here. No, we are not. As I said, the mask requirement is universal. We just don't have the ability to do it any other way. I wish we could, but unfortunately we don't. So then there's some information from Mr. Rosenhaus and Mr. Cocozello about the SAT. We are going to be offering the SAT in school for our seniors on two different, the SAT and the ACT. So don't worry if you've been shut out of a testing center. The College Board and the ACT offer that as an opportunity that you can take it in class on a school day. And we're going to do that here for you. So do not worry about being able to take the SAT or the ACT. You're going to have that opportunity here at school on a school day, not on a Saturday. So very good question. What happens if a student or faculty member contracts the virus? We do not shut the whole school down. We will do contact tracing to see who was in contact with that person and ask those people to quarantine. Just to give you an example of what it would take to close school. And again, this is not a perfect analogy, but during the flu season, the state has a benchmark. If 30% of a school's students are sick with the flu, they will actually close the school. So even if you use something remotely like that, that would be a pretty large number of students. So if you look back at our quarantine and social and contact tracing procedures that I went through, again, I wanted, in the interest of time, I didn't want to go into too much detail, but you'll see all the detail there, and Mrs. McAuliffe has shared that information as well in the chat about how to respond to someone if someone is positive, if it's a teacher, if it's a student, what do we do? So if a student is physically unable to wear a mask, and right now we have no students who have asked for that accommodation. So if a student is physically unable to wear a mask, they would have to stay home. They would have to attend school virtually, but as of now, we have no one that has asked for that or has indicated that. So logging in every day. So that's a matter of, so if there's a connection issue, like if for some reason your phone doesn't work or you can't connect to do the screening at home, we will see students in school. We will see, okay, 7:15's come and gone. These kids haven't checked in. We know where they are in first period. So our goal would be to catch them to do the screening in school. Again, that's the exception, not the norm. So we will do what we can on our end to accommodate that. But if it becomes a regular problem over and over again, then we'd have to have a conversation with the student's parents. So the question about what a student has to do to returning, if you look at the illness policy, you'll see what's necessary, what you need to do to return to school. So we're not requiring like multiple tests over and over again. But again, there are specific requirements for if the test is negative, how long a student has to stay out before he can come back to school, or an employee to come back to school. And those are all in the illness policy in that health and wellness section that you'll be getting shortly. So mask breaks will be at different points during the day. Certainly during lunch period, you won't have to wear a mask at all for that half-hour period. Given the fact that we have such a large number of students here, and we're not able to put students 6 feet apart at all times, that's why masks have to be worn as often as possible. So for virtual learning for the school year, yes, in order for a student to have that, we need to know the medical reason why that's the case. So you would need to contact Mrs. McAuliffe to find out why that's the case, or what's necessary for your son to have virtual learning. It's not virtual learning, by the way, in the same sense that it was during the spring. It's your son will be following his regular class schedule. It's not a parallel structure where the teacher is going to be teaching the student separately. The student will be logged on and go from class to class all day long, just as if he were here in person. So it's not like there'll only be 2 class periods a day and then a fair amount of downtime or independent time. If a student is home, they're going to be following the schedule that, out of fairness to our own teachers, to not ask them to do double or triple duty. They're just going to be following along their regular class schedule, but from home in front of a computer. So there is no limit to the number of students on a bus. We want to have as few students as possible. Right now, if you had 6 feet for each student, 6 feet around for a student on a 54-passenger bus, you can only fit 11 students on the bus. That is clearly not practical. So the state's guidelines indicate that if that's not possible or practical, you have to have face coverings. So in order for us, we're going to spread students out as much as we can, but that combined with face coverings will enable us to use our buses safely. So then another question I do not believe Governor Murphy has said that he will mandate private school. Actually, he will be. He said that, it was quoted in the Star Ledger last week. If he orders public schools to close, he will order private schools to close. He has said that publicly. That has not happened. He hasn't said that about, he is sticking to the guidance that he gave out on June 26th. So we don't, I don't anticipate that happening, but you never know. But the executive orders that were issued in the spring that closed schools applied to all schools K through 16, including colleges and universities. So as of now, we are able to go back to school. Some districts are not. Most districts are in one form or another. But the governor has said that if public schools are closed, he will close private schools as well. Hopefully it will not come to that. Yes, there will be a 6 o'clock bus, same as we normally do. Yes, winter sports, we have no idea what that's going to look like yet. Fall sports aren't even fully developed. So as we get information from the state, we'll share that with you, but we have no idea. Tryouts for soccer, the dates there, again, all that information has been shared to prospective families, but that's also available on the school's athletics page. So there's further information about the SAT. So the dress code, we are probably going to relax the dress code. We're going to work on specifically because of phys ed. So we'll likely have the students be able to wear shorts for an extended period, but we still have a couple more of those details to iron out, and we're going to be doing that this week, but you'll know that well in advance. The dress code is relaxed for orientation, but they'll certainly know well in advance before the start of classes. So if a student doesn't have activities, he does not have to leave. You don't have to leave, but there won't be a whole lot of options. Like there won't be places to hang out. There will be seats in the library where a student could wait till the 4 o'clock bus. Obviously our students, many of them take the 4 o'clock bus as well as the 6 o'clock bus because that's their only way to get home. So we will provide places for students to be. We're hoping to develop some intramural options that are outside so students can blow off some steam, maybe play ultimate frisbee or intramural soccer, other things like that. Those are things that we're in the process of developing right now. Mr. Rubling has been helping me think out loud about what those might look like. But we will have, if a student just wants to do schoolwork before going home on the 4 o'clock bus or the 6 o'clock bus, depending on where he lives, we will have places for him to do that. So do not feel like a student won't have anywhere to go that's safe or where he can work productively. Please be assured those options will exist. Yes, Sage will allow double servings. That's part of the reason why we lengthen the lunch period. So if students want to, they can either take more when they go for the first time or they can go back and get something else. So one question is about snow days. The short answer is yes. We are likely not going to have snow days in the traditional sense. Obviously, if a snowstorm dumps 6 inches of snow at 5 o'clock in the morning, you can't give teachers warning. So you might have a traditional snow day, but we've learned a lot and have more capabilities now than we ever did to deliver remotely. So if we anticipate a hurricane or a storm of some kind that might keep school closed for a day or two, we can pivot to an online version of the school day that will maintain continuity. So this is we've developed those muscles and we intend to try them out at some point during the year. The PSATs, we give the PSATs to our sophomores and juniors, the sophomores for practice, the juniors to participate in the National Merit Competition. Those are done in school, so we anticipate being able to do that in October as we normally do. You don't have to go to a test center for that. We offer them to our students at the same, right around the time where we have parent-teacher conferences. So if you have specific questions about lunch or the dining services, yes, please feel free to contact Sage directly. if you want, if there's a specific need that Sage is for whatever reason just not able to meet in the current situation, you could always send him with something, or he could bring something with him. I don't think that would be necessary, but that's always an option. If there's a specific reason that right now Sage just can't meet your son's requirements. But please contact Steve Reeder. He's our manager, and he'd be more than happy to work with you. And one question about homecoming. Yes, there will be homecoming. When is the question? It's unlikely that we'll be able to have an event with thousands of people on campus in October, but what is possible and a good option is moving it to the spring and tying it to the dedication for St. Benedict Hall, our new building, which is rapidly going up and which we anticipate being able to move into in the spring before the end of the school year. The building's about 4 months ahead of schedule. So if we're going to make a final decision about homecoming very soon, but it's unlikely at this point that it will happen in the fall, but we definitely want to have it in the spring. Okay, so there's a few questions in the question box, so let me address those. No, students do not have to leave at a certain time. They can stay as long as they want. As I said, there will be places where students will be able to go. Back to school night. Yes, we can provide an option for virtual back to school night. We have to figure out, we can basically be, some of the folks would be there in person and other people would participate through Zoom on the smart board like you're doing right now. So we can work that out and we'll have a way to share that preference with us well before back to school night happens. Prospects for the winter musical, I don't know. It's possible that we might be able to do it again without an audience, with enough. There were schools that did it this past spring. So exactly, we'd have to wait and see. We have to see what the constraints are before we figure out what option we would choose. So we can't have the chorus in particular, because the nature of the chorus is that the sound is a consolidated group of people in a close space. So right now, the Scola and Benedictones are not happening. I regret that very much, but that's where we are at the moment. Hopefully that won't have to be in place for very long. Students that continually violate the mask requirement, it'd be the same as if they defied a teacher in class. So you have a conversation with them, they get a warning, and then after that, it goes into the regular discipline system. We need students to cooperate. This is not something that's optional. So we will make it abundantly clear, and for students who are not cooperating or staff who are not cooperating, we will address that in an appropriate way. So one question about not attending large gatherings or having large gatherings. Certainly you have control over having large parties. Don't have them. Don't host them. Keep your sons from going to them. So parents, you are our biggest ally in preventing that from happening. We don't want super spreader events. So we are making it very clear that that's something we definitely want to discourage. That's why, for example, we would move homecoming to another time of the year. So how to agree to keep kids from going to large parties? Do what parents do best. Lay down rules, have consequences. Don't have them, discourage them, and don't let your kids go to them if you know that they're happening. If people don't go, they'll peter out on their own. That's something we can't control on our own. We need to appeal to you and that community spirit and mutual responsibility spirit to make that happen. So an option for virtual school, our position is virtual school is appropriate if there's a student who has a serious medical reason. As I said before, you would need to contact Mrs. McAuliffe and provide the medical information that she'll ask for to document why virtual schooling is required, and then we can take it from there. Will there be a prom? I hope so. That's not till the spring. I'm hoping that by then this is all a bad memory, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Opportunities for older students to interact with younger students. Yes. So in our deanery program, on their teams, that's going to be happening, obviously with social distancing and masks, but we're going to facilitate that kind of older student interaction with younger students as we do every day. That's something that is very much a part of our program, and we very much want to make sure that that continues to happen. All right. So that is all the questions that we have. Oh, no, there's a couple more. Nope, there are no requirements for mask logos. I guess not having a Bergen Catholic mask or a Seton Hall Prep mask, probably not a good idea. But we are, with the Mothers Guild is making masks available. But no, we are going to issue each student a mask when they come, but they can choose to use that or not. So an option for virtual orientation. Oh, for student orientation. I don't know if it's for parents. If it's for back to school night, yes. For back to school night, yes, we can do it. For students, if they can't be here because of quarantine, then we don't really have an option for a virtual option. We don't have a virtual option for orientation, unfortunately. So the first day of school, so if you look on the presentation, which I'll show you shortly, you'll be getting, like, as soon as we're done tonight. The first day of orientation for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders is the 25th of August. For 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, the 26th. And the first day of class for all students is Monday, the 31st of August. The bus schedules, Mr. Mano should be sending those out shortly. He's not on the call right now, but if you email him, you can get them from him. But if they haven't come out, they should be coming out shortly. Student orientation is in person. So student orientation is in person. Students are required to be here. Again, unless there's a medical reason not to, or they need to quarantine because they were traveling. Okay. So I really appreciate your patience and your time. It's a lot. It's kind of drinking from a fire hose. And again, you'll be getting all this shortly emailed to you if it hasn't been emailed already. You'll be getting a recording of tonight. You'll be getting the Adobe Spark presentation, as well as a link to at the hub on our webpage. All right. So there's one other question about busing on orientation day. If you contact Mr. Mano, it depends on where you live, and under the current conditions, we may be able to only offer limited service on orientation days. But if you contact Mr. Mano, he can answer that question better than I can right now. So you should have received information about when students have to report for orientation. If you haven't gotten it already, it should be coming shortly. Normally they're here fairly early, like regular school time, around 8 o'clock. I don't have that schedule right in front of me, but if you contact Dr. Durso, he likely will be able to answer that question for you. All right. Again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for all of your help and support to make this work. As I said, we're doing everything we humanly can to get your sons back on campus and to have you back on campus. We want to see you as well. And so we're very much looking forward to having everyone back very, very shortly. So if you have any questions, need more information, do not hesitate to ask. Email me, call me, or call any of the folks in the presentation. We're here for you. We're here for your sons, and we'll see you very, very shortly. So take care, everybody. God bless.